everyone. This is Rachel. I'm an intern with the Climate Mental Health Network, and I am here today with Emily Diamond. Emily is a research scientist who studies toxins and their effect on human health, is a researcher of health inequality and violence who has been doing that work for about 20 years, which led her to study autism, first responders, and run a study of over 2,000 people looking at adversity and health impacts of on them and their children, and is the principal investigator of two studies of disaster experience of things such as climate or war, and also recovery. And one study is for children and one is adults. And I am here with Emily to actually have a conversation about art and environment and um, what role art plays in society. And so I want to start this conversation by asking Emily to talk about how you got started in art and what kind of role it's played in your journey.
Thank you. Um, I think when I was growing up, I wanted to be an artist. And as I got older, one of the things I wanted to do was be a children's book illustrator because I think that giving children wonder as they enter the world is so, so important. And I had been deeply influenced by books that were beautifully illustrated. My mom's from Japan, and I remember books from Japan, from England, from the United States. We would buy books sometimes just for the illustrations, and I was so deeply moved by them, and I have them still. And in fact, many years ago, when there was an Oakland Hills fire that destroyed many homes and took many lives, I remember my father saying to collect a few things that we wanted to save. And I had nothing except a book that my mom read to me that was beautifully illustrated. That was the only thing I really wanted to save. And so I knew, like, oh, this is very meaningful to me. And for a while I was a bookseller, and I liked illustrated books. And I think my grandmother also had that interest. Then I became a psychologist, and I began studying Parkinson's disease and its relationship to toxins among welders and other things. But art never left left me because I think the curiosity that it takes and the determination that it takes and the amount of practice of like non-judgmental, just keep on doing it. Don't be too harsh on yourself. We're going to we're going to finish this painting or we're going to finish this poem. I think those things taught me a lot, and they carried over into science.
Mm.
And so had I not had those skills, I don't think I would be quite the person that I am now. And I use them daily. I use those skills daily.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing a bit about your journey and connecting those pieces. And I'm curious for you to talk a bit too about this relationship with art and language.
Mm, that is an excellent question. I think because I use words a lot and I write out my talks and I write book chapters, I'm struggling around language all the time and how to pick the best word. But when you are in the middle of throwing a pot or doing a painting, you have to confront the fact that there isn't a one-to-one correspondence between the feelings that we have and the language we have available. And this is true of all languages, all civilizations. I don't think there is a language that exists now or that existed in the past where people were completely satisfied that they had all the words to express their complex feelings. And so when cuneiform writing was invented by Sumerians around 5,500 years ago, what we see is that it was very cool to learn how to write, and people used it for accounting, they used it for medicine, they did all kinds of cool things with it, but it didn't get rid of art. It didn't get rid of art anywhere in the world when other writing systems developed, because art has the ability to take us where language doesn't. And that's very important.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, with climate change, we might have feelings that are just a little bit too complex for what our language can easily communicate. And that's where I think art does an incredible job.
Yeah.
In fact, there is no civilization that doesn't have art. So you can see how intrinsically connected those two things are.
Yeah, it's a constant thread that really connects
Absolutely.
humanity. And you know, in addition to kind of being the voice that language can't fill, in what other ways can art be used to meet this moment in time that we're all living through?
That's a great question. In several ways. One is I think that art is a meditation. So when we meet the moment, I think a lot of people might feel overwhelmed. They might feel scared. They might feel frustrated. They might feel that they hadn't done enough around climate issues or political issues they care about. And a wonderful way to decompress is to do a little bit of art or a lot of art, because it is a form of meditation to go down the alleyways and the byways of aesthetics and to wonder, does this color go with that color? Does this texture feel right on the canvas? If you're writing a song, do these words go together well? What's the melody going to be like? And so I think you can meet challenging times by having something that's healing, and I think art can do that. And I also think that it's a way of building community. We may think that a wonderful way of making community is to find people who hold the exact positions we do and meet with them and have meetings with them. But another way is to make community because you've given artwork to friends and they've shared their artwork and you talk about it together. And it's like giving a meal, it's like sharing a meal. You've shared your art and you build community around that. That's a backdoor way into making community that I think is very powerful and that's needed at this time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And in what ways does art, you kind of touched on this, but allow us to connect throughout time, and what values does this um bring to us? Like, in what ways does it allow us to kind of connect to our own identities and values?
I think about this a lot because when I do art, that's one process, but I'm such an admirer of other people's art. And I have a deep craving to understand, how did that vase get made? How did they make that glaze? How did they make that instrument? And when you learn those things, you are touching upon people who might have been thriving several thousand years ago, and you know that they confronted famines, droughts, maybe a climate event, maybe a war. And so when you see their flute, their textiles, you understand, oh, this is a common thread, as you said, across time. And I feel more connected to them. And they were there doing these beautiful things, going through what they did, and I can do that too. So it's a way of recognizing, yeah, climate destabilization on a global scale hasn't quite happened this way since the Younger Dryas, which is a time period like 10,000 years ago. But we're living it now, and other people had gone through other things, and we can see that in their art. And when we feel the pottery made by other people in other times, surely they had gone through things and they persisted, and we will too.
Yeah, there's this, it's this reminder, I think, that curiosity and courage and awe has always existed, and it will remain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think when I'd been teaching the biological bases of behavior, the class would often touch upon what is depression or what is anxiety, things like that. And those lectures have so much to do with genetics, adversity, inheritance, the microbiome, medications, and things like that. But on another level, if I ask myself, what does it mean to feel low? It's actually a state where I don't have wonder.
Mm.
And so I feel like where there's wonder, there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of energy. And that wonder could be around how colors fit together, it could be how textures work together, it could be why I really like the sound of that particular passage in a piece of music. But wonder is incredibly important, and it doesn't work its way into the science of depression so much. But when you put that part of it away or to the side, you can see that there's a great capacity to be uplifted at this time in particular when we have political turmoil and climate turmoil, just to have more wonder in our lives
Mhm.
about a lot of things.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
medicine.
Yeah. And the way too that these things can exist even within the constraints of our own lives. And can you talk a little bit about how art is kind of this practice of making meaning and fulfillment within constraint and boundaries?
Yeah, I in college, I remember somebody saying to me that creativity was what you do with constraints. And I was like, oh, tell me more. I didn't know about this. And what he said was, well, you only have a canvas that's so big, and you have to put something meaningful, beautiful, important in it. That's the creativity. You don't have an endless canvas. And true enough, I think I was 18 when I heard that, and I've been thinking about it ever since. But a textile has can't go on for too long, a song can't go on forever. So there's the constraint in which you build the world that you're going to put into it. And to a large degree, I think our lives have bookends, and we have to think intentionally about what we're going to put in there. So the practice of art and living have this similarity in which there is a constraint there, and you want to fill it with something meaningful, powerful, beautiful, touching, that connects with other people, that brings joy or safety to other lives. So thinking about constraints is really important. And people get nervous when they confront a canvas that's blank. Like putting the first mark is often really difficult. Or on an empty page with the brush, like, what am I going to do? But confronting that is a wonderful practice because it's what we do with our whole lives. We fill it with something beautiful and meaningful, hopefully.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really beautiful, I think, perspective shifter. And I think, art is, yes, a way of communication, but also a way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a way of thinking. If people thought that thinking was only in language, I think they're missing a huge part of thinking. And as we think about the destabilizing climate, there's every need to keep on thinking in all kinds of ways, visually, by color, by shape, by sound. We need all the thinking we can have.
Yeah. And also I think to archive this moment, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. When I think about keeping a diary or doing art, sometimes I think, and this can be true of science too, there are many scientists who have had projects that were shut down. Some of the things you're doing for your colleagues now, or for participants, or for people, you want to show them, the result of the study, or you want to show them the art that you made. And some of it I think is for a future audience because it's not the right time to share that. And so if you're keeping a diary and it's not for everyone's consumption, you can put in a poem, you can put in a drawing, and you remember that moment, and that possibly a person at another time is going to be moved by, oh, so this is how this ordinary person went through these tumultuous times. And I also think that about science, when people have science projects that have been shut down, maybe you try and do your science and it's not for the people now. It's going to be for people later to see this is how this scientist met these difficult moments and what she or he or they tried to do. So in that way, it sort of expands the timeline because it's not just a communication to the people now, it's a communication to people in the future of how we rose to the occasion or tried to. I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and lastly, I would love for you to share your thoughts about the way art allows us to think about, modern ethics
Mm,
and what kind of values we want to embrace.
nice question. I think because AI has the capacity to make art, and we're already seeing a lot about that. You can see AI created art all over the place. That it pushes us to think about the role of the human touch in art and how important it really is to us. And in that personal dialogue or the dialogue we have with other people, it will make us flesh out our ethics around how important is it that that voice is a human voice singing and it belongs to a certain person named Rachel, or that painting was done by a certain person. And the ethics around production and the ethics around the human touch and what gets to say it's art and what is not, I think those are very, very important questions. And they come up in tandem with our climate problems because our climate issues and AI somewhat arose together and they feed into each other. And so can think about them together. AI uses an enormous amount of water in order to keep the computers required to store all this information cool at a time when we know that there's major desertification, major deserts are forming. So we can think about ethics in AI art, ethics in the sort of moment we live in. And maybe there are songs to be written about that. Maybe there's a poem to be written about that. Maybe somebody wants to write a book or an essay or draw about it. However we think about it or communicate about it, I think it's incredibly important to do.
Absolutely. And the same way, we approach art with intentionality and kind of a pause is how we need to think about this moment in climate
Absolutely.
worlds.
Absolutely. When you make art, one thing it requires, and I had earlier mentioned curiosity and determination, it also requires intentionality. And there is meeting this moment in our political lives and climate destabilization requires us to be intentional about a lot of things, our purchases, our travels, the values we share, all kinds of things. And the practice of art is really the practice of facing a constraint with great intentionality.
Mhm. Mm. That was I think a really great point to end it on. Thank you so much for this really beautiful conversation. And I hope, it encourages people to create not for the sake of producing, but for the act of doing and all that does for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Rachel. This was a wonderful interview.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. Well, there we are.
I think Did it might still be recording. Do you know?
Oh, you'll have to cut that out then. Hold
Yeah,
on,
no
hold
worries.
on. I don't know how to stop my recording here. Oh, here's